Hi, my name is Jasmine Zhang, and I'm your first discussion leader. And our topic today is going to be the internet and social media in China. So we're going to walk through 6 different topics today. The first one being how the internet came up, or came to its popularity in China, the platforms that they use in China, so like apps, applications, etc., and websites. And then we're going to learn about censorship in China. And then we're going to see how the public engages with social media and the internet. And we're going to touch on the author's opinion. So this is from the book that we're reading in class, called The Internet, Social Media, and a Changing China. We're going to touch on the author's opinions. And then we're going to lastly touch on some questions and thoughts that we should be asking ourselves and thinking about. So next we have this timeline here, and I'm just going to walk through some of the events that happened from when China first introduced the internet to today. So back in 1987, China sent out its first email. It was from China to Germany, and that's a really big move because China, for the most part, has been or was a closed-door country, and I think being able to send out or connect to the internet is a huge move to being connected globally with the rest of the world. In 1994, China built its first cable connector to the World Wide Web, the WWW, and this is also touching back on globalization. It's also just another step towards being connected with the world. In 1996, Shanghai opens the first internet cafe in China. So this is important because now we know an internet cafe is catered to the public. So that means that the public now has access to this global resource. So the public of China, connection with the world. In 2001, China joins the World Trade Organization, and this is just another step to globalization. In 2009, Weibo is introduced. So one of the first online kind of like social media-ish type of platforms is starting to become popular. And in 2011, so this is 2 years after, Weixin is introduced. We commonly know this as WeChat. It's really popular. I'm sure we've all heard it or maybe even use it. I do. In 2013, this is 4 years after Weibo is introduced. Weibo now then has 10 million users. So in the matter of 4 years, this platform gained 10 million new users. I think that's a pretty big number. And today, the internet in China has over 900 million users. So from 1987 all the way until 2020 today, that's 33 years. In 33 years, 900 million people are now connected to this global resource. So what apps do they use? What apps do they like to use? Just like the US, China has its own set of mass apps that users love. However, the most popular ones are often copycat versions of the apps that we use in the States. But with time, these apps have slowly exceeded the originals, becoming more versatile and suited for its user. And so we know that Americans have a set of apps that we love, and then China, basically before they really had a foundation, they took a lot of the ideas that these popular apps in America, and made practically the same exact version of it, but just Chinese. So we have WhatsApp and WeChat. WhatsApp and WeChat are both video, kind of like conference and SMS, apps that we use, but WeChat has kind of gone above and beyond. It's now like basically an Uber, Yelp, Grubhub, service provider, all-in-one bank account, all-in-one app, so it's definitely a lot more than WhatsApp. Next we have YouTube and Youku, basically the same thing. YouTube allows the general public to post videos online. Youku also does the same thing. We have Google and Baidu. Google is our search engine, our most popular search engine, and Baidu is China's most popular search engine. And then we have Amazon and Alibaba. Amazon is a website that you can also buy your basic clothing, t-shirts, jeans, and your basic household items like pots and pans. And Alibaba does the same exact thing. And then we have Twitter and Weibo. So Twitter is like a microblogging site where you can write little blits of whatever you want and share it. Weibo does the same thing. So now that we've talked about apps, I think it's good to understand why China doesn't just adopt the American apps and use them, but rather create their own version that is exactly like the American version. Because of censorship, which moves us on to our next topic, the Great Firewall. So the Great Firewall is dubbed from the Great Wall of China, but instead refers to internet censorship. And just like how the physical wall was used to keep unwanted outsiders out, this virtual wall is used to keep unwanted outside information out. There's different levels of censorship and control in China. They use the social media platforms and the internet to influence people in their opinions and prevent them from seeing certain things. So I've split the censorship and control trends into 3 categories or 3 levels, and so the least extremist level is just warning and flagging. If you post something that's maybe a little bit inappropriate, then you might get flagged. Like, they deem smoking or tattoos a little bit inappropriate, so you could get flagged for that. And then your post could be removed if it promotes violent things like violence, terrorism, or your private parts, things that maybe shouldn't be on the internet or is harmful to the general public. And the second level of censorship and control is lagging. So the concept behind lagging is that for some of the websites that they don't want you to be on, or for some of the content that they don't want you to see, there will be a lag that also comes with it. For example, if I were to click on a YouTube video and it had a lot of lag to it, I probably wouldn't watch the whole thing because it's inconvenient for me and I'm used to a higher speed of streaming. So it's not that I clicked off the video because I don't like the content, but rather I've clicked off the video because it's slow. And then next is blocking. As I've mentioned before with the copycat apps, most of those apps are blocked in China. And that's because prohibiting or having their own set of apps makes it easier to filter out, collect data, and really just control what is being posted and what should be posted, what is being said, etc. Third is data. With so many users on the internet and on WeChat, it's easy for China to source a mass amount of public data. So your information, you need well, actually now a lot of apps also require you to have your full name in order to register and download an app. So the government has a lot of that information. And then influences. China also has its own group of people that will influence them or post their public opinion. So quote quote public opinion, in that the government kind of wants them to share a more pro-China opinion, or opinion that the government wants the public to have, and they'll post that under anti, or like something that isn't so for the government, and they would post that and try to sway the public. It's kind of like if you see online and everyone is kind of thinking a certain way, you might also want to think that way too. And back to the timeline. In 2014 to 2015, the National Security passed a draft requiring internet providers to help censor. So an internet provider is something like Spectrum, and the concept is that these internet providers will block you from accessing certain websites. So a little bit more about some of the laws passed for censoring. In Article 19, I'm reading this straight from humanrightswatch.org, and basically you will be flagged or banned if the content you post is somewhere along these lines, if you're violating the basic principles as they are confirmed in the Constitution, if you are jeopardizing the security of the nation, or if you are harming the honor and the interest of the nation, if you are inciting hatred against people, racism against people, and disrupting the solidarity of people, if you are disrupting national policies on religion, propagating evil cults and superstitions, if you are spreading rumors, false rumors, disturbing social order, and disrupting social stability, if you are spreading pornography, gambling, violence, terror, if you are assaulting, defaming third parties, or infringing on the legal rights of third parties, if you are inciting illegal assemblies, associations, marches, protests, if you are conducting activities in the name of an illegal civil organization, or any other content prohibited by laws or rules. So I think by the general idea of it, it's a lot of like, if you are against the government, you might get censored kind of thing, which is something to think about. Which brings me to the public opinion. Like, what does the public take on this? How does the public react to, let's say, some of the things that the government isn't doing right or is morally right? The public carries the power of voicing their opinion. Social media has quickly become the gateway to sharing a range of opinions, like food reviews to political stances. But how much of the Chinese public opinion affects the policies of China? Which brings me back to the timeline. So here I'm just going to touch on a few topics that were touched on in the reading about how the public kind of affected what the government's action was. So in 2003, there was a SARS outbreak, much like COVID, and the government of China silenced some of the initial rumors, saying that they were false. And as we saw in earlier the laws, it's like if anything is considered a false rumor, it can be censored. So that was the case in this. I think the language of the law is a little bit, it's like, take it how you want it, and like we can use it to say a lot of things are false rumors and then censor it kind of thing. So that was one incident in 2003. In 2008, there was a Sanlu melamine tainted product. So that is when they found plastic content in baby formula, and that's really bad because babies are really susceptible to small amounts of toxic, more than we are. Like if we eat plastic and ingest it, it won't be good for us, but we won't die. But babies are kind of a different story, right? So basically, people took it upon the internet and social media to voice their opinion and say, hey, look, this isn't right. Like, we don't like what's going on here. And so the public influenced the government, and the government took action, which is good. And the companies were made aware, and even now the baby formula companies are still trying to come back from that. A lot of users have been a little bit like pushed away from buying domestic baby formula from China. They more look for outside or like foreign imports of baby formula because they're worried about the safety and grade of it. In another incident in 2013, Yang Hui draws attention to poor habits of the local police department. So there was a murder at the karaoke bar, and they had deemed it as suicide of someone pushing someone off, of someone throwing themselves off a building. But he was like, hey, look, this is really suspicious, and I think the local police department should really look into it. But I did a little bit of research on it, and he was detained for his voicing his opinion, which is interesting. But in the end, the police department did take some action, so it did influence them. But I have this quote here, and I think it really pertains to the situation. Well, it was from the book, so it does pertain to the situation. And it says, reaching the legally right reasons for the wrong reasons. And that basically means, yes, the police department should do something about it, and yes, they did. But why did they do that? Because the public was like, hey, look, this is not right, and you should focus your attention here, and then they took action. It's more like, so that's why it's wrong. Like, the police department should have taken that action without the media pushing for it, is kind of what this quote means. Which, transitioning into perfectly our next part, is the author's opinion. I've broken up, well, authors, there's more than one, there's three, into different categories of positive, neutral, and negative, because not everything they say in the reading is negative or is positive. So there's three sections, and I'm going to judge them based on their language, the instances they choose to focus on, and the action that they choose to highlight. So first we have positive. I want you to take a look at this first text, and why this is a positive is because it says, Chinese citizens have enjoyed much more freedom to express opinions on a wide range of issues, including political ones, etc., etc. So this is basically applauding China for allowing its citizens to have access to this global resource and to basically promote a freedom of speech. And the next sentence I want to focus on in this part is, they call it a political phenomenon. And that's a positive word, so that's why this is a positive opinion. Next text is, they again applaud the Chinese citizens to spread information about and share their views on international affairs. And yeah, it's again saying like, hey, look, these Chinese citizens finally get to have this platform to voice their opinions on maybe international topics. Next, I want to highlight a point where the authors take a more neutral stance. So, if we read here, it says, when bloggers spread the word about the readings that the American embassy revealed much poorer air quality than official data published by Beijing's municipal government, blah blah blah, that's saying like, oh hey, look, the air quality in China isn't great, and I'm sure China doesn't want people to know that. So they're kind of like pointing out this bad thing, but then they say, but eventually led to a greater transparency in China's officially published air quality data, meaning China took active steps to fix this issue and to be more transparent. That's why I think it's kind of like, hey look, it's a bad thing, but then here's a good thing. So I think it's a neutral stance. And I have three quotes from the negative, because I think the author definitely leans more towards a negative viewpoint. And it's, the first one says that China lacks, in the first line, a lack of transparency, saying that China is not very transparent about some of their problems or research or findings. And then the next one, it's, the CCP risks the charge that it is inefficiently concerned about affronts to China's interests, but permits protests to unfold. It also uses language like wrathful Chinese nationalists and represses for public protests in this first line. So I think wrathful Chinese nationalists, basically people who really support China and are passionate about that, and then adding wrathful into it kind of has a bad connotation. It's a negative word. And then represses is not a great word. It's like suppressing. This quote I want to highlight some words here. So it refers to China as a regime in the third line. And it says, like, a lot of it's parentheses after it says spread positive energy, and then in parentheses meaning regime favored messages. So it's kind of like taking what China is saying and being like, no, this is actually what it means. This is the positive way that China is saying it, and here is what the negative meaning actually is. And to me, that just screams the author doesn't really agree with what China is doing or saying. Which leaves us with some thoughts and questions that we should think about. So questions to ask yourself is, like, what will the future look like for China? Will censorship be enhanced and toughened up, like VPNs, for example? The current government is already starting to focus on those and try to take them down. So what does the future for China look like? And what should the future look like? What should the government be doing? Should the government be censoring its public? Or should it be taking a step back? Or should it find a middle ground? What is right? And is censorship wrong? Is it wrong to censor dangerous things that might be harmful for the public? Or should we let the public be exposed to all types of material? And then some things to think about are, we might be concerned, but is the Chinese public concerned about their maybe freedom of roaming the internet? And how is America similar to in terms of censorship and media control? How much of what we see online affects us in almost like a brainwashing sort of way? So I think we should always see some problems, and we can always bring it back and see, like, is this happening here too? And that's the rest of my presentation. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me with any questions. Here are some resources I use, and thank you to SlidesGo for providing me with this slideshow format. Thank you guys.